Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Preimesberger, editor of eWEEK. Thank you very much for joining us today on this segment of eWEEK eSpeaks. It's a series of IT interviews with thought leaders in various segments of the business. And our interviewee today is Prakash Darji. Prakash is the general manager of Pure Storage in Mountain View, California. Prakash, welcome.
Thanks, Chris, for having me.
Pure Storage has always been an interesting story for me. Before I became editor of eWEEK, I was the storage writer for, I don't know, 10 years maybe, even though I did other things. But Pure was one of the companies that came into being while I was reporting on storage and cloud storage, all kinds of storage at eWEEK. And it has taken off like a rocket. It really has found a formula for success. And so I know these things, but I think it would be better explained from you, the general manager. Prakash, tell us a little bit about Pure Storage and how it sets itself apart in the market.
Well, it's interesting. I would say Pure's a little bit over 10 years old now. I think we just hit our 11th year anniversary. But for the first 10 years, I think we started with a pretty simple mission of saying, you know what, compute and networking have generally moved forward, but storage was living in the past and it became a bottleneck for most applications. So let's solve the performance angle using a technology inflection point of all flash. And let's also take away all of the complexity that's involved with tuning storage for different workloads and those types of things. Because if you can just rely on performance of the media to give you simplicity, you have the ability to go ahead and transform how people can, do applications without needing a lot of tuning. And the first kind of 10 years, I think a lot of the same things that happened parallel in the industry, where virtualization became a big trend, right? VMware started virtualizing. It wasn't just about bare metal, which actually added another performance overhead. So, I would say for the first 10 years, as virtualization grew for application development, Pure became an enabler and grew with that trend to make that real. To now, about 70% of the workloads deployed on Pure today are virtualized.
Wow. What kinds of businesses are your best clients or your best potential clients? Are there any verticals that stand out for Pure, or are you pretty much applicable across the board?
Well, storage systems in general are applicable across the board, but I will tell you where kind of our business started and where, some of the early adopters were. We're located in downtown Mountain View, and about, the first probably many customers were startups, SaaS startups, 25 miles from headquarters in Silicon Valley. So, small companies that were, startups at one point. ServiceNow, for example. There's a lot of SaaS companies that are customers of ours in the Bay Area. And, they're not small companies anymore. They're very large SaaS companies. But, when they were starting out, and Pure was starting out 10 years ago, they weren't going to build something on a legacy architecture. They were actually going to build forward. And so we're pretty dominant in the SaaS vertical, like for large SaaS high-tech companies. And, the other thing we've found is healthcare is another very, very strong industry for us, whether it be Epic healthcare systems or even PACS for some of the large data, as people are starting to do, not just I need radiology diagrams, but I need to do machine learning to discover changes in spinal pattern, right, over decades. For example, I have 2 small children right now, and, my concern in the COVID virtual world right now is that they're going to be hunched in front of a screen well before they're actually going to develop, normal human being spines. I feel like that you got a generation of human beings that are going to grow up hunched over, right, with iPhones and screens. And chiropractors are going to be in business for a while, I guess. So,
way to look at it.
But that's, so a lot of our technology is applicable broad base overall, but those are 2 very strong industries.
Yeah. The company that you mentioned is 10 years old. You've acquired some assets over the years, and the most recent company you just bought recently is called Portworx. Tell us about the value of Portworx to the overall platform.
Well, so over the first, 10 years, there wasn't a lot of movement in application development. There was a standard way of developing applications, three-tier client-server architecture. There was databases, compute, in kind of UI. And the major change in application development was happening in the UI space, from screens to mobile to HTML5 to interactive. There was a lot of things happening at the front end around user interaction.
Mm-hmm.
But the application development architectures really hadn't changed. And what VMware was doing was trying to give you portability in that same application development architecture. Now we see actually a lot of changes from serverless to microservices to container development. And a lot of these things are trying to solve two or three things in parallel. One, how do you have portability across hyperscalers, in a cloud environment as well as on-premise? So hybrid and multi-cloud is very, very big. And container abstraction gives you a way of working across multiple environments. Second is scale. If you're building an application that's scaling to 1 billion consumers like Facebook, it's a different application architecture paradigm you need from a scale of compute standpoint that containers, ephemeral containers lead themselves well into. But what happened was containers generally started in the stateless application world. Spin it up and scale as you need, but it was missing a lot of the aspects of state that traditional applications had. And you had to make compromise. And Portworx was a company that was doing a good job at driving and bringing some of the aspects of modernizing storage right into an application-driven kind of world. It's no longer people provisioning storage. It's application developers saying what they need for their containers and their workloads, some of which will be stateful, some of which will be stateless. Mm-hmm. And as we take a look at the trends happening in market today, we do see that the next 10 years, there's going to be a new class of applications being developed in a new way that are going to be container first. And Portworx is critical to our strategy overall of taking that on. And then kind of the second major trend we see is the consumption model of how people consume storage is changing. Mm-hmm. So, it used to be about ship me a box, size a box, give me the performance of the box. And, if the cloud has taught us something, capacity planning, especially with COVID, right? Like, you might have gone from 100% in office to 100% virtual overnight. You need the flexibility to scale up and down as you see and need. And you need the capability and capacity to say, you know what? If Pure was focused on simplifying storage operations, can we simplify it further by learning from the cloud operating model, saying, you know what if we run it for you remotely? Mm-hmm. So this is kind of the IoT world. No one thinks about running storage at the edge. They define, their policies and they push them to the edge. And the way we look at storage and data centers is kind of like the edge, right? So as we move forward, we're driving to next-gen application development as a company, because that's a big problem in the industry with Portworx. And we're driving towards a new consumption model for storage, both for new application development, as well as modernizing, the three-tier client-server architectures that people have had by simplifying storage operations so they can focus on other value add.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're spot on this. And Pure was built in the cloud, and it was built during the cloud, and it's really the next generation storage kind of a system, being modern, much more modern than some of the legacy systems that we've grown up with. But you're still looking ahead at the future of data protection and data movement. And this is how it's going to be, is in containers that can be spun up in minutes and can be blown up in minutes too. It's all about agility and scale and speed, and that's what this is about, I suppose, huh?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring up data protection, right? So I think to some degree, if you actually take a look at storage and how it's grown up over time, you've almost always ended up with purpose-built storage for purpose-built use cases. And then you were like, okay, now I need to back that up and I need to protect it. And data protection became kind of independent. There's a bunch of vendors that actually build data protection things. But if you rethink the framework, really, people just want storage and they don't want to worry about losing their data. And if something happens, maybe there's a ransomware attack, they need to be able to recover quickly. So storage and data protection isn't just about backup, because taking a backup is an insurance policy. What you need to know, like I know in California, I had a friend of ours, or a friend of mine, like our CMO, actually, his house was just burnt down in one of the California fires recently, right? And when it's great, everyone has an insurance policy, but when an event like that happens and it hits you personally, all that matters is how quickly you can get back up and running, right? Mm-hmm. You got a family, you got kids, and you just got to get up and running quickly. And that's the way I think a modern data, offering needs to think. And with the approach we're taking at Pure Storage, we've got a solution in FlashBlade, which is actually used for rapid ransomware recovery overall. And the goal is not about, archive and backup. The goal is how do you recover when something happens? Because that's really kind of the problem today that I believe is unsolved in data protection.
Yeah.
So as we go forward, right? It's funny, I had a mentor or friend in the past, Phil Wilmington. He was the CEO of PeopleSoft at one point. He mentioned something to me. He said, God couldn't have built the world in 7 days with an installed base, right? And it's something that, sticks with me. Pure has been successful modernizing and solving performance problems and simplicity. And, in an era where there's a lot of, hey, complacency. And now, we don't want to be that company that becomes complacent. The world is changing. There are new problems. Application development is changing. Data protection requirements in the world of ransomware and hackers is changing. Modernizing consumption experience is changing. And we want to invent the future. So that, the spirit of what we're trying to do is invent and solve the problems of the future so we can get ahead of it.
Yeah. Prakash Darji, thank you very, very much, General Manager of Pure Storage. Thanks for being on eSpeaks.
All right, thanks for having me.
And for everybody following along, thanks very much and have a great rest of your eWEEK. Thanks for joining us on eWEEK eSpeaks. Go to eWEEK.com to hear more conversations with IT thought leaders.